last 2 weeks, 10 of the last 15 days at a silent retreat. So, given that fact, I was tempted to just stand up here silently, to pull a Philip Glass and just be silent for the whole time. But I think instead I'll read one of Tim's poems from his book, and it's called Craning. Far from the Washington potholes, bands of cranes root unbothered on high west Texas plains. Wait out these weeks of January. Ignore our frenzied face paint, iced fog auto wrecks. By thousands, lesser sand hills postpone the ritual do-si-do. Postpone alleging any fledglings to tend near water. Their tuck-tuck, tuck-tuck trumpets weave hours. Bustles raised above sedge, they lunch. Imagine we could bend to know, could fly with our legs and necks stretched long. How windy an apple tastes midwinter.
And I'm going to read one of Sarah's poems. It's called Within. From the thicket the winter wren sings the sky inside him, and in garden beds seeds are breaking open, pale roots anchoring, letting themselves be held, each one a child half asleep in her father's arms. I remember waking enough to sink more deeply into being carried, burrowing into the earth of my father's chest. Heaven is a sensation my body knows, just as Mary Magdalene's knew the teacher. Turning when he called her in the garden, flies warming themselves on the rolled away stone, sunlight casting blue off their wings, and tiny eyes of forget-me-nots, piercing not just the flesh, but the heart. Good night now, Sarah, my father said, as though my name tasted sweet. He tucked me in bed as gently as you cover a seed or pull bitter cress from among spring flowers. The scilla, fragile and drowsy, a little doubtful, like Thomas, and the season of rising is upon us again. Sing to them, winter wren, tell them the dead, having risen. The dead having risen linger inside us like song.
Two poets. Is this working?
Speak into the end of it. Yeah, that's the only way. Their direction.
The only way. Okay. Well, I'm not sure that these two poets, Tim Whitsel and Sara Burant, even really need an introduction. I think they could manage quite well on their own. But here I am, and it's an honor to be their introducer. So, it's been many years now that I've been lucky enough to read a poem in progress by each of these poets probably every other week or so, which has been a great privilege. But I have to say, the satisfaction of settling into a whole reunion of Tim poems and a whole gathering of Sara poems at once feels almost like a decadent pleasure. And it's one that you all get to experience tonight. And of course, if you read their books, you get to be in that midst. I find that a particular poet's voice has a way of resonating among their poems, its particular music becoming more audible as you spend time with the poems, almost like spending time with people in a family who resemble each other in different ways. I love being grounded in Tim Whitsel's thickets of words. His poems have an earthy pungency. His words have palpable heft and texture. Yellow pungence, blooming effusion, cinquefoil, freckle fruit percuss. He has great words, and I've always been able to feel his poems in my mouth, like nice chewy bread. And the world he describes, his rivers and trees, mud, feral apples, sizzling sauces, bicycles, birds, and music, this world has the vivid intensity you sometimes see when the sun comes beneath a storm cloud and everything dazzles and glows. I hope you get that experience. I do. Sara Burant's poems share many elements with Tim's. Rivers and trees, apples, mushrooms, plants, and birds. They're both longtime residents of the Willamette Valley. But while Tim's poems leave me feeling intensely in the world he describes, Sara's take me to the edges of hers, to where things begin to shift, where the known world falls away, where what you see becomes something vanishing or something new. Sing to them, winter wren. Tell them the dead, having risen, linger inside us like a song. The physical world leads us again and again to fleeting glimpses of things beyond it. Tonight we get to hear these two wonderful poetic voices interspersed with one another, and even at times, as you have seen, read by one another. Two voices in two voices. Sara Burant and Tim Whitsel.
How was that? Is it like that?
Bring it up.
Well, I hope all of Sara's poems don't make me cry. I have enough of my own to make me cry. I'm going to start with a new poem this evening. In fact, it's so new that when I was printing it out, I made a change, which you're never supposed to do that close to a reading. I thought, gosh, this is a poem that is set in about 1950. It describes my parents before I was born, and a place that I'd never been. I thought, I'm going to switch it to simple present. So we'll see how it works. Julia, you've read it the other way, so let me know. The title is Diaphanous, which means translucent or filmy, and it's based on a set of slides that were taken at the orchard where they were living at the time. Diaphanous. When she is a young wife, mother hovers as my father wields saws, hatchets, and knives in Dowd's orchard. 2 years he works this promissory of apples and pears, a genius to rows of cinder jigsaw pieces through freezing drizzle or leafless Indiana light. Jonathan, Grimes Golden, Northern Spy, Seckle, Comise. Fresh snow is rutted to a plain 2-story farmhouse by their old Dodge. At the tall window, this scant woman with a tight brunette perm waits. White clapboard, white car, drifts of dazzling frozen white. Dowd knows he is lucky to get a university man with the grit of war filing his temper to a keen edge. My father knows Pacific tumult, distance, and a year of Russian. But mother is lost against a coverlet of snow. Marriage plies strains jagged as a Copeland hoedown. She will massage her right eyelid behind round tortoiseshell glasses, knowing more in that instant than my father can carry, perfecting his tools amid others' trees. How numerous the dormant bumblebees and stacked white stables of honeymakers, primed for pollinating her panic. Mother will stand at the window, clutching her side in a drab wool blanket. She sees everything those two men on the tractored scaffold size up and cut away, leaving the better branches, dying to leave the branches of freeze-toughened buds. Come spring, she will erupt in flowers. Sarah's going to read one of my poems.
Earlier this month, I had the very great pleasure of house-sitting at Tim and Carol's. And while I was there, I took the opportunity to read the book for the second or third time. And I realized while I was there how much and how deeply Tim's property and the place where he lives inform his work. It was really quite an amazing experience to read the poems in that setting, and I also had the good fortune to meet the trees Tim and the shrubs Tim cultivates so beautifully. And this poem is about one of them, Victoria Plum. In April, I doubt these fists of green freckle fruit. June ratchets, school ends. I send my boy to strip, half at least, between his thumb and finger. He climbs a fiberglass ladder, shifts between vulnerable crotches, then shakes the topmost branches of oblong dimes he cannot safely reach. Weeks pass. Farmers winnow the valley's first hay. I send him to do the job again. Tender, second-year wood arcs under thickening promises of sugar. I cannot garrote enough plenty. Suspense splays the grain. July opens cracks, then in August an unkind wind jostles. Night nip from a deer. A branch the size of my knee breaks. Is this how the queen's bright reach went awry? Overbearing. The call of nature splits my trust in words. I'd imagined a Rolex-proud salesman or an irate Little League dad, not these imperious jewels. Little plum tree, what fruit you afford me late summer is terribly sweet, pruned by casualty. Next year I promise to be ruthless in the realm. Speak softly, but brace your luscious load with several big sticks.
This little note of my poems were poems that had to do with trees. My father was a horticulturist back in the Midwest. There is a saying that the apple doesn't fall far, so we play with that saying in this poem because I headed west when I was 19, 18, to go to Seattle, to go to college and be among mountains and to get a different topography. And I don't think he was that, I don't know, he had tears in his eyes probably when we drove away, but you know, he held it together better than I would. Anyways, other than a half a summer, I've been on the West Coast pretty much ever since. I figured he'd get smart and move west eventually with grandkids, but it didn't happen. Anyways, it's a long introduction to a poem called Matriarch West. If I follow the trunk of this enormous tree upward, will it lead me to branches of wisdom today, a matrix of deft tendrils taking from slate sky grains of exigent health? I stood under this queen of old growth a decade ago with my 76-year-old dad. We didn't strain so against Mom's dementia. I marveled at the bounty of rain, a respite from the saws and whistles cat-calling on slopes above my home, the sawing of age. The apple or pear doesn't fall far. Nobody spoke of distant Hoosier soy fields. There were no nuts or marketable fruit to savor as we stood on the narrow Boy Scout bridge and sampled the flutter of water passing below us side by side, miles from the continental crest. Bound away, I'm bound away, old Wabash. Today we stand armed at the base of this mother. What pursues me in western Oregon? Summer and showers, pith or sweetness? More than 50 years I've moved on his flat feet.
Now I'm going to read something from my book. I think I'll start with the first poem in the book, which is called Mushrooming. It occurs to me, listening to Tim and remembering some things that have been said about his writing, that it has the flavor of jazz, which I know he loves because I've seen now his collection of CDs. And I'm a little afraid that my poetry might be more like soft rock or worse, Kenny G. Chamber music. Okay, I'll take that. Okay, mushrooming. We examine each wrinkle and pucker of duff, each pale knuckle wedged into seams, and every eyebrow arched above the mud. Our walking sticks nudge twisted umbilicals. Our fingers poke the nubs and crowns. Everywhere they are rising. Blue as fingertips bound with twine. Yellow as jaundiced skin. Smooth, ridged, furrowed, pursed. Gray as bloodless lips. Tiny heads, mute tongues, caught on delicate tips the way we're caught on the verge. Wanting, not wanting to recognize this burgeoning, this riot, unloosed by buried webs. Fruits we dare not taste unless we name them. Far from the trail we've wandered, seeking what's hidden, our other selves, forbidden, even dangerous, but yearning to be known fully, naked as we are. And the next poem I think I'll read is one which features my father. There are a number of poems in the collection about my father. I guess it was my way of expressing gratitude and my sense of sadness over losing him a few years ago. After reading from Genesis, I consider angels. This fall, the oak leaves are tinged with orange, not merely brown, and the light on the few left on the trees, the slant November light, makes fleshy this ethereal shine. Maybe the wind blew through the oaks of Mamre, stirring up dust and leaves, and something shimmered before Abraham's eyes. The wind does that, alters the light, blows open shutters and doors, even the fastness within a human heart. I taste an oak leaf, not bitter, but salty sweet, as the meat-filled piroshkis my father made at Christmas time. To the angels Abraham gave curds and calf meat, water for washing their dusty feet, and something swung open as they talked and ate. He saw his children as stars, distant, yet somehow within. My mother says she prays to my father, certain he's become an angel. But I think some angel, with that beery smile, half a garlic bulb nose, and wearing a second-hand suit, who, if he appeared right now, would take my hands, hum the beer barrel polka, and papa, we twirl around the leafy ground. After he died, I called, "Where are you?" And yes, I heard a voice, saying something he wouldn't have said, not in a million lifetimes, something airy and spiritual. But if he's an angel, as my mother believes, he is like these oaks, common, solid. You'd offer him kielbasa, golubkis, strong black coffee. He wouldn't take off his socks and shoes to wash his feet in front of strangers, daughters, even priests. And if he spoke about stars, leaves, or anything else, my father, the angel, would say, "It's a son of a gun, how you stand looking on, and they shine." Kielbasa is Polish sausage. Golubkis are stuffed cabbages. I should have said that before I read it, but I forgot. This next poem also has a bit of Polish in it, and I will probably butcher the language because I really don't know how to speak it. But the translation of what the few words I'm going to try to say is a part of the Hail Mary. It's Holy Mary, Mother of God. And this poem is about, I think it's really about what children know about what's going on in the family. Maybe things that are never said. And it's also, it features my maternal grandmother and grandfather. My maternal grandmother was the daughter of 2 Polish immigrants, and they spoke Polish in the home. And my grandfather did not come from that community. He had a different background and had aspirations and sort of took my grandmother out of the old neighborhood, and he was a car salesman. So this is called The Country of Last Hours. In the story my grandmother never told, the children have been put to bed, and she is waiting for my grandfather to drive her to the small house in Polish town where her mother lies dying. But he is working late again. As my grandmother washes the dishes, she imagines a smoky room where ice clinks in highball glasses. Cards are shuffled, dealt, and that girl Irma's silk-stockinged thighs rub against each other as, laughing, her lips full and red, she brings the men their drinks. My grandmother doesn't wish for wings. Leaving the old neighborhood, she lost her sense of direction. And the angels who might guide her are busy standing in bread lines, sleeping in boxcars, begging at back doors. She offers up winding the clock, brushing her hair. She offers the hunger of these hours, birdseed cast for morning's sparrows on the snow. If a well were to open in the yard, she'd leap, wishing to land in the country of her mother's last hours, saying into the falling dark as into a dear one's ear, Svieta Mario Mitko Burja, words that keep her until her husband cries himself away and arrives home, breath boozy, ties straight, and they lift the children from bed, My grandmother's silence stunning, her own daughter into listening harder still as the car creeps along nameless, frozen streets. That poem is not in the book. I should have mentioned that too. And this is another new poem, or newer poem. It's called Epiphany 1, and I'll just say about it that it mentions the image at the end is actually stolen from Julian of Norwich, who was a 14th century Christian mystic who lived as an anchoress, which means that she was sort of walled off in a little room adjacent to a church. And that's where she lived out her life, and she had, while she was there, she had this like stunning vision of a revelation of Christ's love and God, and she wrote it down in two versions, one the short version, which was written shortly after the vision occurred, and the other in a much longer version where she sort of did theology with the vision and expanded it. Anyway, the image has stuck with me ever since I read it, and it actually appears in more than one of my poems. Epiphany 1. But I meant to mention the hazel catkins, how the candle gray afternoons wick and glow like there's no tomorrow, the magi overwhelmed with joy, and the star, or stars, the way they cluster and burn heat and ions, pollen adrift, setting new worlds in motion. Crimson blossoms yawn awake in the universe of twigs, and the pollen enters those mouths, touches those tongues, saying yes, starting tiny nubs to swell, hazelnuts, the same nut Julian of Norwich feels she is holding as God speaks, telling how everything created, stars, trees, flowers, men and women, wise and otherwise, is nothing more or less than the nut God forms with a word in her cradling hand.
The next three poems have to do with some sort of trip or transit, and all three are in fact in the book we say ourselves. And Sarah is going to read the middle one, the longer one. I just get past my program to find the actual poem. Didn't look like the first line. If dogs were mountains, I would be hiking your forepaws, pausing now and then to catch not just my breath, but glimpses of sea, snatches of breeze teasing your muzzle, and seals cavorting in the deeps beyond your nose. I would have been to the knoll between your ears to lean against a smooth boulder and ingratiate the striped June beetle puffing at my shadows shift. At the rough, a moraine lined with mountain hemlock, between your shoulders I would sprawl and nap to the mantle rising, the fall of this daytime moon.
This poem is called To the Winemaker 10 Years After, and I particularly enjoy this poem, well, for a number of reasons, but one is that this landscape is really, the landscape it describes is one through which I bicycle toured a couple of summers ago. To the Winemaker 10 Years After. I am trying to dress this up by playing Duke Ellington and holding on to the last bottle months after we drank it empty. The country we sailed across that Saturday after Thanksgiving featured escarpments, poplar-fringed coulees, and empty farmyards. Wind gusts drove silt, scraps of cinquefoil, and tumbleweed. We shouldn't have been surprised at the flashing chevron of state cops parked across Highway 395. Our pumpkin and buff VW bus rode shifty against the dry storm like a desperate Conestoga. Even after the cops let us continue, I thought more of the sadness of where we had been. Our holiday-taught rooms of Christian radio, noisy hymns, board games, and more soiled laundry than love. I flitted across wide turns, marveling how neglect hollows the heart. A boy would arrive a year later, conceived between gasps among the straight-laced Granny Smiths growing west of Othello. Migrant desire. We honor the inane, dear John, owning unscathed lives. In a dust storm, everybody watches for the mail. That wind pushed across scablands and bent bare willow stems along draws. Taunted our turns to the west. 2 daughters slept in elevated seats. A tumbleweed big as a picnic table bounded out of the south and hit our speeding hollow can. Everybody came awake. I fought to keep tires on the road. Their mother sang them back to dreams. I drove on to Pasco, Tucci, and Loudon. We bought your wine for keeping. It was layered and intersected with brightness like the Snake River. I could taste dust, smell sweet sage and a bedrock of cherry. How did the clove-spiced plums get in, and the hail-scarred bings? A wine built big in a blasted aluminum barn in an onion town far from anywhere. Not Right Bank Bordeaux or Napa Red, but last Christmas with pork roast, apple chutney, potatoes, and peppered gravy. It was the wild landscape we runaways needed to taste.
Speed trap. What smidgen of cloud piss do we measure between terse blandishments? Sun smelts tinsel from cars trim. The May air is lovely beyond torture of destination or the sprung trap. After the flap, the tall officer with thinning hair and hopes will attend his son's baseball game. Hours east, the gimped out-of-towner will lummox onto his old friend's sagging deck and thrall in the mewling of hidden newborn kittens. His friend will weigh the dole of turbulent clouds against orderly slashes of hay windrows, the budded armatures of grapes reshaping old draws. They will savor drink as blinds are drawn on the red prophecies of cottonwoods. Trapped citizen and farmer will figure the speed of fledgling days against the ticket of a first star. Now I'm Sarah. I'd probably keep my hat on backwards for this one too. The poem is called Crows Walking. They rock their shoulders and roll their hips, a laid-back swagger, a Birkenstock saunter. Easy, no worries, all good. Their pants, if they wore them, would be splattered with mud or paint, vestiges of devotion to the moment. Shaggy feathers brim their eyes. You can't tell what they're thinking. They seem perfectly content to walk in circles for an hour all afternoon even the rest of their lives. So what if they have wings? For as long as they choose to stay, they own this beach. Undistracted by other birds cruising above the waves, undaunted by the staring passerby, suddenly the crows gambol up the sand, jiving with the cries they raise to please themselves alone, until, opening their wings, they drum the air and wheel away.
Two poems which are not in the book as well. Calypso Orchids. Tell me, who can think or scheme when the green has risen? When even the sky is green, who can be anywhere but wandering? Are we near or far? Have we grown beards? Do we wear crowns? Trill away, tiny wren. Flute on, Monsieur Sparrow. Cackle, O pileated god of the woods, each concealed in your fastness of green. But fairy bell, fringe cup, inside out flower, tell us why we've come. Heaven could be where the calypso orchids shimmy, little flirts beckoning with hot mama pink. On our knees, clumsy, we touch noses to petals, wanting to believe that luscious vanilla will usher in something like ecstasy. A split second is all we ask, a moment of vanishment, then to return, laden as bees. And this poem describes a landscape very similar to the one in Tim's poem about the winemaker, or the wine. And it's Eastern Oregon, and it's pretty self-explanatory. On touring by tandem, Eastern Oregon, July. In Pilot Rock, a man was yelling, cursing at a woman sitting hunched in a car, but we couldn't spare any sympathy or dismay, having climbed some 15 miles from Pendleton, slow, against the wind, our wills bent on trying not to curse the long grade. The miles yet to pedal that day. Beyond town, the landscape shifted, high plateau to hills, fold upon fold of slope and rocky cleft, escarpments plunging to salty barrens, washes of crumbling stone. Heat swaddled the road and sagebrush flats, and wire-fenced nothing we could see. No cows, no signs, in fact, of human habitation. Desolate, I thought, lonely. Words the hawks defied, great pairs muscling out of gusts into thermals mounted in wide, effortless circles. When a prairie falcon coasted alongside us, we took it as a sign, though of what we could not say. And here, ribs like weathered staves, and there fine legs clothed in tattered hide, and there a smashed coyote. Ribbons of guts, organs like deflating balloons, tail oddly alive as the wind swept low. The stench of rotting flesh dogged us. North of Colfax, night before last, 2 coyotes had watched our bivouac, ears silhouetted by late light slanting over a burn. Then heads, shoulders, that still apprehension, that silky vanishing into rows of tender wheat. Did we in tandem dream them? Did we dream the long grade up Battle Mountain? Briefly, it seemed we were the last, the only people on earth. The sun rode its merciless arc, and each stone and thistle, each bird and bone and dry blade of grass, cast back the echo of an ancient stillness, an emptiness not empty at all.
I'm going to read 4 sections from the title sequence, just so you get a taste for it. And I'm told I'll be reading at the library sometime towards the end of the year. The idea is that since the title of the poem is We Say Ourselves, I'm going to do it with multiple voices, so I have people that I'm going to twist their arm to read different sections of it, but I'll read 4 sections just for tonight. And it's not a linear narrative. It operates more by motif. It's a musical kind of thing, and the recurrent things in here are salmon and a character called Old Boy, who at the time that I began this prose poem 10 years ago, he was 52, so now he's about 62 or 63. And he and the bully are both Vietnam vets, and Old Boy lives with his bicycle, on his bicycle, and gathers cans. So this is section 4. We watch the salmon sway, then thrash madly again, as if accompanying a sightless individual returning to childhood streets and alleys after a prolonged absence. We are moved as she negotiates, tapping, scraping, and clicking between the architectures of memory and intrusions, curd ripening in the way, dying's sour endowment. We make a pact to reconcile the body, this house or that engorged tree trunk, a new retaining wall, held fast as though we were accountable for this unclean currency we own. Not just Western landscapes earn the adjective wild. Presences quicken these stolen lands our fathers work so doggedly to prove. Then in sequence 5, the word you should know is Dasein. It's a word that Martin Heidegger used in his philosophy. Basically, for our purposes, means being there or being present in a world of presence. So the first word is Dasein, and the second word is design. Eagles waddle along gravel bars, stricken with abundance, glee choristers exhorting in high, sour patch voices, the dorsal fins nosing into rain-swelled inlets. Sex tolls for thee. Furor further in and furious thrashes. We await evening when traveler may quit selling congested heart drugs and return to moisten his clarinet reed, mend orifice and pulse, compounded. Upriver, a spinster piano teacher furnishes her bathroom with small elements of ardor. Survey this diminished tonic row. Like pubescent piano students, we are left with rooms to wander and room to wonder. Radiance couples with violence. Salmon litter the hollows of recently flooded farms like cotton balls used a week ago to remove eyeshadow, blush, mascara, or blood. Nightfall approaches. Eagles retire to strip canopies of big leaf maple and red alder. Traffickers in November's convent of the dead. Birds conveying longing and grief. jump back to section 2. Bludgeoned once over a girlfriend, the boy, old boy, is phoned 40 years later. Turns out the girlfriend is still the bully's wife, a ventriloquist dummy speaking his only considerate verbs. Through the handset, she invokes the beaten boy to heal in her man what the war and detachment made of insouciance and lust. Old boy lifts rocks to build a small cairn. At another precipice, youths throw stones to sound how deep the fall. 7. For a year, salmon young feed on parents' hoary, buffeted bodies, then head to sea. Chance dismembers us. Along the country road, old boy bicycles between discarded cans to build his cairn. Terrapin shells of others' blue thirst. Old boy is 62 and more misused than his bike. By afternoon, he calls the aluminum cairn dinner. Silver song. The river rises like an enormous dining table, subsides. A rower's shoulders extend hard, rowing across current, then dollop the left oar through the exultant jade of early spring. On a venerable street, a radio plays behind the screen window, plays tunes we'd rather drink or fight to than dance. From cut bank and pasture, big leaf maples announce impending May. Lilacs blossom, sweet and beautiful. Between our gasps, someone has lifted spare change and souvenirs from the kitchen counters, the hotel dressers, from breast pockets of our lives. Where is our bully now? Since we're doing this tandem thing, I'm going to read a poem as it was and as it lived for about, I don't know, the first 8 months of its life, and I kept fighting and trying to make it be what I wanted it to be. And then I finally gave up, and something came to me out of my memory. So I'm going to read it as it was as quickly as I can so you can see how it was, and then Sarah and I are going to read it in 2 voices. And it's called Cabin Fever, and it has to do with this angst and this wanderlust and this, oh my God, let's get out of this fog, this rain, oh, we got to go somewhere different now. Unless, of course, you grew up here and it's normal. But. Cabin Fever. At Hood River, calls prevail between mendicant gulls, echoing a lust that guides our escape. Overhead, the jet stream seeds stratocumulus clouds. Flocks of rain-stricken bipeds, we shimmy along the escarpment. Gimme, gimme. Skip the jewelry and ashram boutiques. We'll sample wines. These urges and Achilles' tendons were conditioned, certainly for some other brief. Shouldn't we retire to a sunny town with Victorian porches, high ceilings, and wasted drapes? Above, the unsold condos. Below, gonzo cafes and outdoor sports specialties. Everywhere anxious sailboards buffet the broad river's surf. Tutti-frutti the wakes of grain barges. A gull can yodel and coast above fields sown to red wheat, alfalfa, or forage pits of plowed refuse. But soil endures, our dark promise, our yoke. Futile how we plot mercy or rebukes around a stone fence anchor. Holiday garlands go up, rivals come down along these glib slant streets. A sunburned wheat farmer fires the heater in his motor coach, and a spreadsheet refugee coaxes vineyard cuttings in a blitz of light. Salmon follow a furrow home below a phalanx of moaning penstalks. That's part of the dam where the turbines release the water. Dams senesce with or without our river bluff vigils. So, you know, you hit somewhere around 50. You're getting there, right?
I just turned 50.
Well, if you
It was about time, too.
if you don't go on meditation boot camp for 9 hours or 9 days of silence, then sometimes you find yourself waking up at night and your mind just, you know, takes off with something. And
Can I say something?
yeah.
We forgot to thank Scott. We started and we didn't say thanks, Scott.
Where is he?
He's
Is he
over
still
there.
here?
Thanks, Scott.
You want your own?
Yes.
Okay, so she's going to read the descant. Cabin fever. At Hood River, calls prevail between mendicant gulls, echoing a lust
The Lord is my shepherd.
that guides our escape. Overhead, the jet stream seeds stratocumulus clouds.
I shall not be in want.
Flocks of rain-stricken bipeds, we shimmy along the escarpment. Give me, give me.
He makes me lie down in green pastures.
Skip the jewelry and ashram boutiques will sample wines.
He leads me beside quiet waters.
These urges and Achilles tendons were conditioned certainly for some other grief. Shouldn't we retire
He restores my soul.
to a sunny town with Victorian porches, high ceilings, and wasted drapes? Above the unsold condos, below gonzo cafes and outdoor sports specialties.
He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Everywhere anxious sailboards buffet the broad river surf, tutti-frutti the wakes of grain barges.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
A gull can yodel then coast above fields sown to red wheat, alfalfa, or forage pits of plowed refuse.
I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
But soil endures our dark promise, our yoke.
Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Futile how we plot mercy or rebukes around a stone fence anchor.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies.
Holiday garlands go up, rivals come down along these glib slant streets. A sunburned wheat farmer fires the heater in his motor coach.
You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows.
And a spreadsheet refugee coaxes vineyard cuttings in a blitz of light.
Surely goodness and love will follow me all my days.
Salmon follow a furrow home below a phalanx of moaning penstalks.
And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Dams senesce with or without our river bluff vigils. Thank you. This is way harder than one person reading it than the other person. And we were still throwing emails back and forth at 3 o'clock this afternoon because, of course, she was on a silent person retreat for 9 days. It's going all right, isn't it? Anybody falling asleep out there? Okay, I've read this one before, but there are people here who know the person in this poem, so I'm going to read it again. What do you need to know? Oh, there's a bunch of religious composers mentioned somewhere through here. And Bart, who's named in the poem, he and his wife, Donna, I learned long after I knew them as musical people at the Presbyterian Church, learned that they were actively involved in this group that was sponsoring poor kids down in Brazil. And one of their proteges, Priscilla, is now, I think, a junior or a senior at the University of Oregon. Sophomore? School of Music. She's an extraordinary pianist. And they went down as a part of their duties to the organization and visited down there. And so you'll hear how that fits into the poem. And, it's the religious season, and in spring it's the season of Lent, which precedes Holy Week. So the title is a play on that. It's called Bart's Spring Relent. He has moved bees thrumming among flowers of maple, clover, or blackberry along the Mackenzie lowland for years. This spring, old Bart smokes a sanctuary's layered white hives and tense box buzz. Rayfont Williams, Charles Wesley, Walker's Southern Harmony, John Rutter, all be damned. To disguise his Parkinson's tremors in the front row of the choir, while his wife wields a staunch baton, Bart imitates dances bees do, announcing fresh nectar at the entrance to the hive. Did he stymie step across a protege's pollen of grace in a Brazil shanty town? 'Cause it's almost a samba andante, this blooming effusion never learned through a month of stoic Sundays. Does he do the Priscilla here, or does he mimic our Russian organist as she oscillates svelte legs between treble, contrabass, and treble pedals? Sunny Bart jives moves fit more for Bahia or a bee than any elder, a boogie to the glory of flowers, honey, whatever ineffable power or powerlessness should ask him to tremble more than we Presbyterians can stand. This is another poem about music, and it's really new, and I was futzing with it even this morning. It's in two parts, and the first half of it came almost perfectly, like a clatter. And I've been trying to learn what the second part was supposed to say for quite a while since. But it also has to do with music. Every righteous 50s jazz album hoards two moments. One, a June night, my parents quit fuming over the dishes, and the immense humidity of Indiana colonizes screens of open bedroom windows as dapper Frank Sinatra sings My Way, and the summer wind starts spreading the news through the clink of our neighbors playing horseshoes and flinging jibes and flirts in the yard across the hedge. My parents subside into night clothes, a housebound couple desperate on their side of honeysuckle to make a good account for Jesus' sake, and they're always empty pockets. All the hurts of jobs, tiffs, unpaid invoices, and reprobate weaknesses are massaged, nudged, unguent, till ease overtakes three boys too hot to sleep anywhere but on sheet-softened air mattresses on the cool, tiled concrete floor. The small fan purrs side to side like a lookout on the prow of innocence. How shall the furtive be redeemed? 2. I am 13, spiced, will plow plow through hot, dark dirt to hear anything illicit, to hold haughty April in one palm, then the other. Between our wholesome soft twist choir and symphonic band come winged chrome and fedoras, come these suave JFK acolytes, a rat pack. I ogle as the jazz band files in. Mom occupies her land of it is written, flustered, to syncopate borders on sin. I unroll the concert program, loyal to my brother's bulky symphonic clarinet. Sheet music settles. The audience relaxes. Mr. Myers tilts 3 rows of rapt attention into his 1, 2, 3, 4. This swank coaxing proteges into radiance, into Basie's corner pocket, then Limehouse blues. Always his baton clicking against the black metal edge of the lead alto's stand, initiating till he might cut, stamp, and sashay backwards into our scarred bleachers' realm, while his furrowed young soloist rollicks out of the languor, don't get around much anymore, and the horn sections lean as if to lift butter from cream, those creases in Mr. Myers' black tuxedo trousers churning like blades. His starched white jacket is damp, beginning to stick at the lumbar, his black bow tie stiff as bourbon, his left hand sparring, head jerking as if time can be taunted to a fervor. The last poem I'm going to read in this section is the first poem in the book, and it's a D-I-V-I-S-I-V-E, a field guide to pronunciation. It seems like there are words that they get changed in the way we pronounce them. I don't know, they come to the fore and somehow or another we mispronounce them for years, so suddenly somebody fixes it for us, like suddenly niche became niche. How did that happen? You know? So that D-I-V-I-S-I-V-E is one of those words where I came from, they said it different, you know? But it's a description of the area where Sarah House sat a while ago and where I live, the Mohawk Valley. Picture the ridge sprawled like an enormous newt, its tail pointing to the place north where rivers combine. One brown, muddied by cattle, the larger clear as any complexion, sloughed by stones. The asphalt road rises to meet this tail, hemmed on the upper flank by camas, black-eyed Susan and wild rose. Blackberry and feral apples lattice the land below. Teasel. A small divide, a look mark. Mohawk water veers a last meander or 3 from Mackenzie. Suburbs congregate roofs across from the hayfield and calving pasture. In transit, I have learned to call this a sill. So often fog bulges here against mornings copious with light. Divide. We understand as an oxygen-starved now, or recoil from the verbs swung still. But along this incline I weigh the modifier, a dry stone between my palms. Crown for a cairn, or wet stone to sharpen the tool. How to execute the watershed vowel. Would you rhyme our word with permissive father or derisive older brother? A adjusting his soiled cap. Willows concuss along the last gravel bar above the confluence. I thrust my transplant spade, surgical, into the roots of wild blooms. Just about stole it.
I also wanted to say that, well, the next couple of poems I'm reading are from the book Verge, and a few funny things happened between my book getting accepted and it being published, and I won't go into all that. Some of you know the story. But one of the unfortunate things that happened is that this lovely cover, which was created specifically for this book after she read the poems by my friend Rebecca, who's sitting right here in the front row. Her name was not noted on the cover page, or on the inside where it says cover art. They didn't put her name, and it was missed, and I feel very badly about that, but I'd like to acknowledge her tonight. So, this poem is called All Flesh, and at the risk of being redundant, I'm reading it. It also features that image from Julian of Norwich with God holding the hazelnut. Julian has a hazelnut, or seems to have a hazelnut in her hand, and it's an image she has in the vision. And well, I hope it's not redundant. I think it works pretty differently in this poem. All flesh. Unless I'm seeing things in this brilliant light, the orange still lies on the sidewalk's edge. I've walked many miles since I first saw it, someone having peeled, then dropped it here. Or perhaps it fell from the roof of a car, coming apart as it hit the ground, 2 half-moons in the dust. Just yesterday, settled in its body, the orange quivered inwardly, juicy and sweet, and shone outwardly, the sun's own child. Now the sun-parched membrane has drawn away from the flesh, which nonetheless glows when a stray spark of sunlight strikes it. Once, I dreamed of my death. Someone had taken great care, wrapping me in linen, the way a fruit is tucked inside its skin, and setting me gently upon the pyre. I woke in tears over the kindness shown my body, for the flames I became, the heat, the rising, shards of bone left for the earth to hold, the way Julian held a hazelnut in her vision. And wasn't she shown in a clear light that all flesh, all matter, is ever cupped like a nut, a fruit, a seed in God's own hand? Think of it. Everything seen and unseen, even the slow rot at the edges of our days. And this next poem, I actually brought a little visual aid. It's a little bird's nest. It's very sweet. If you want to come look at it after the reading, you can. I got it in Wisconsin the summer after my father, right a few days after my father died. And I found it on the ground, and it's got this wonderful milkweed silk woven in among the grasses, which you wouldn't find here because there isn't a lot of milkweed the same way there is back there. Anyway, when my mother in the last couple of years, my mother had to move out of the family home, and when we were there collecting things that we wanted to keep, this was really the only thing I actually wanted. I took some other things, but this nest, this is what I wanted. Elegy in which a nest is found twice. After the storm, I found a nest that fit in my hand as if it were made for being found, though reason told me it was not. Told me a bird had woven the grass and milkweed silk with an urge for home and the eggs it would hold, the way I held the nest, the wind having shaken it free. Such gusts there'd been, such howling, and I'd held fast as my father lay dying, so as not to let anything fall. And here this nest had fallen whole. 3 months have passed, and again I've found the nest on the sill in his house where I left it. Now I think of the fledgling perched on the rim in that instant before wings, earth and sky filling its breast, filling the cup of grass and silk, not left empty behind, but taken hold of and taken in.
But we're reading two. I'm reading one of Sarah's because in the course of trying to plan this reading, we discovered that we had two poems that we'd written years apart and neither of us remembered, and they almost finish in the same image. Sarah's poem is called Waterstone Tree, and hers sort of verges over into early November, and mine actually is like that middle of October. Waterstone Tree. If it were yesterday still or again, I would be at the Japanese garden, unwinding myself down to the ponds, shadow and chill birthing the autumn lives of irises, the intimacy of earth and rhizome beneath the quilt of mud and leaves. I'd know things that must be relearned in the shade of great firs, when the sun is a marbled eye peering over the hill and a child stoops to touch feathers of moss. I'd know how to be small as a winter wren, how to enter the secret rooms of ferns where skeletal leaves become soil. In the Zen garden, I'd whisper to the stones, I am afraid. For they've listened through a thousand seasons and know that each fallen leaf makes possible something new. I'd remember then how to bend like a lace leaf maple spinning gold from November's distant light inside the overturned cup of my heart.
Keep looking.
It's yellow, I remember that part.
And I'm going to wrap it up with almost brand new poem. It's called I'm Pondering These Things. In the night, I hear the sighs of shriveling grapes, the coughs of pears letting go, the faint moans of apples dropping in the yard of the house where I'm staying. Old certainties give way. Mornings a kind of amazement sets in. Light bends, leans close, an announcing angel murmuring in my ear, prompting me to wonder if every angel is the soul's longing to be heard. And so indeed is terrifying, arriving unbidden, bruising the flesh of our fine notions, and initiating the dark, the lonely, the grave business of rot, the medium from which a changed life may spring.
This poem is called Bracing, and you should probably know that Dexter Gordon is now deceased, but legendary tenor saxophone player, and one of his better known numbers was a song called Cheesecake. So when you hear the word cheesecake, it's not food, it's the name of a song. And the word brute occurs, and that's the champagne. It's called Bracing. I make certain this is the last morning of bristling light this autumn, again and again from my fatalist stance behind the kitchen sink. On the stereo, Dexter Gordon tongues grace notes to the head of cheesecake. In the yard, a season is shredding notes. The sweet gums spire a cadenza of yellow to mulberry. Woody stems stripped of basil crisscross the cutting board. 7 jars of tomatoes rumble from a canner bath. The sink water is rosy with pulp. Out beyond the gate, clutches of goldfinches filch, pester, free kernels from tawny stalks of teasel. They'll fly the oil to the river. The saxophone is an effervescing brute. Sound ripples my hollow like the grain in Oregon myrtle, this bowl milled to mollify one vagrant heart tipped over on home dirt. Thank you so much for coming. One last little request. Our friend Sam, is Sam still here? We lose Sam? Made these wonderful posters for us.
He did the YouTube too.
Thank you, Sam. But if you would, sign your name to both of them. I left the borders wide for our souvenir. They'll be up here.